Gay teen was treated like trash and left at a church door. Then a millionaire farmer said, "You're safe now, true gay story." The church door slammed shut behind me with a sound so final it felt like the period at the end of a sentence I never wanted to finish. Rain pounded against my back as I stood there on the stone steps, shivering in a t-shirt that clung to my skin like a second layer of shame. My duffel bag, everything I owned crammed into one torn, second-hand piece of luggage, sat beside me like a loyal dog that didn't know its owner had just been abandoned. I was 18 years old, and I had nowhere to go. My parents had driven me here in complete silence, pulled up to this rural church in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and told me to get out. My mother hadn't even looked at me. My father's last words were, "You made your choice." The choice, apparently, was being honest about who I was. The choice was telling them I was gay. The choice, in their eyes, was throwing away my soul, so they threw me away first. I sat down on those cold steps and let the rain mix with my tears, because what else was there to do? The church was locked. The street was empty. The sky was the color of bruises, and I felt every single one of them on the inside. Then I heard the rumble of a truck engine. I didn't look up at first. Why would I? Nobody stopped for trash on the side of the road, and that's what I was now, discarded, unwanted, left behind. But the engine got louder, then cut off entirely. A truck door opened and slammed shut. Footsteps echoed on wet pavement. "Hey," the voice was deep, warm, cautious. "You okay?" I finally lifted my head. Standing a few feet away was a man, maybe late 20s, early 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges from the rain. He wore a worn denim jacket over a flannel shirt, jeans that had seen better days, and work boots caked with mud. His face was all angles and honesty, with dark eyes that looked at me like I was a person, not a problem. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice cracking on both words. He glanced at my duffel bag, then at the locked church door, then back at me. His expression shifted, something between understanding and fury. "Parents drop you here." I couldn't answer. My throat closed up. I just nodded. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just stood there in the rain, getting soaked, staring at me like he was making a decision that would change everything. Then he said the words that would alter the course of my entire life. "You're safe now, come with me." His name was Jackson Reed, and he owned a farm about 15 miles outside of town. He didn't ask me many questions on the drive there, just turned up the heat in his truck, handed me a blanket from behind the seat, and let me sit in silence while my body slowly stopped shaking. The radio played low, some country song about broken roads and second chances. "I have a guest room," he said eventually, eyes on the road. "Clean sheets, bathroom down the hall, you can stay as long as you need." "I don't have any money," I whispered. "Didn't ask for any." "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the wheel, "Because somebody did it for me once, and because nobody deserves to be thrown away like that. Nobody." We pulled up to a sprawling property, a farmhouse that looked like it had been standing for 100 years, surrounded by fields and a barn and the kind of peace I hadn't felt in months. Jackson cut the engine and turned to me. "My name's Jackson, what's yours?" "Eli," I said, "Eli Carter." "Eli," he tested the name, then nodded. "Welcome home, Eli." Home, the word hit me like a punch to the chest. I hadn't had a home in so long. The guest room was simple but warm, a bed with a thick quilt, wooden furniture that looked handmade, a window that overlooked the fields. Jackson showed me where everything was, left a stack of clean towels on the dresser, and told me dinner would be ready in an hour. "Take your time," he said from the doorway. "And Eli, you don't owe me anything, not explanations, not gratitude, not work. You're here because you deserve to be safe, that's it." Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood there in the middle of that room and cried harder than I'd cried in my entire life. Because for the first time in months, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as everyone had told me I was. Dinner was awkward in the way that all first meals with strangers are. Jackson made spaghetti, simple, filling, perfect. We sat across from each other at a wooden table that had probably hosted 1,000 meals, and he asked me safe questions. Where was I from? Did I finish high school? What did I like to do? I answered carefully, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for him to ask the question that would reveal his real intentions, waiting for the moment when kindness would turn into something darker. But it never came. Instead, Jackson told me about the farm, how he'd inherited it from his grandfather 5 years ago, how he'd built it back up from near bankruptcy through hard work and luck, how he grew soybeans and corn, raised a small herd of cattle, and occasionally took in rescue horses that nobody else wanted. I like fixing broken things, he said with a slight smile, giving them a second chance. The way he said it made me wonder if he was talking about more than just horses. The first week was strange. I kept waiting for Jackson to reveal his true motives, for the charity to come with strings attached. But every day he just went about his work. He'd wake up before dawn, make coffee, and head out to the fields. He'd come back for lunch covered in dirt and sweat, eat quickly, and go back out. He'd return at sunset, exhausted but somehow at peace. And he never asked me for anything. I spent those first days hiding in my room, reading books from his shelf, staring out the window at the endless fields. But on the 8th day, I couldn't stand feeling useless anymore. When Jackson came in for lunch, I had sandwiches made and waiting. He stopped in the doorway, surprise flickering across his face. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." Something shifted in his expression, something warm and approving. He sat down, took a bite, and grinned. "Best sandwich I've had in months." It was such a small thing, but it felt like the first step toward becoming a person again, instead of just a problem someone had dumped on a church doorstep. By the second week, I'd started helping around the farm. Small things at first, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, weeding the vegetable garden. Jackson never asked me to, but he also never stopped me. He'd just nod when he saw me working, sometimes offer a quiet thank you, and keep going. One afternoon, I was in the barn organizing tools when he appeared in the doorway, backlit by golden afternoon sun. "You're good at this," he said. I shrugged. "I like having something to do." "You don't have to earn your place here, Eli." "I know," I set down the hammer I'd been holding, "but I want to, I need to feel useful. Does that make sense?" He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, it does." That night, he taught me how to cook his grandfather's chili recipe. We stood side by side in the kitchen, bumping elbows and laughing when I added too much cayenne. The house smelled like comfort and possibility, and for the first time since arriving, I felt something that wasn't just relief. I felt happy. A month passed, then two. Life on the farm settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and natural. Jackson and I developed an easy partnership. He handled the heavy machinery and livestock, while I took care of the house, the garden, and the smaller daily tasks. We'd eat breakfast together in comfortable silence, work through the day, and spend evenings on the porch watching the sun set over the fields. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his time in the Marines, how he'd served 2 tours before coming home to take care of his dying grandfather. I told him about my childhood, carefully editing out the painful parts, the years of feeling different, the confusion, the fear of being discovered. I didn't tell him why my parents had abandoned me. I was too afraid. Because somewhere along the way, Jackson had become more than just my savior. He'd become my friend, my anchor, the person I most wanted to see every morning and the last person I wanted to say goodnight to. And the thought of losing that, of watching his face change when he learned the truth, was more terrifying than being homeless had ever been. It happened on a Thursday in late summer. Jackson and I were fixing a section of fence in the far pasture, working in the kind of easy silence we'd perfected. The sun beat down mercilessly, and we were both shirtless, covered in sweat and dirt. I'd learned not to stare, to keep my eyes on my work, instead of on the way muscles moved beneath his tanned skin, the way sweat dripped down his spine. "Hand me the wire cutters," he said, and I passed them over, our fingers brushing briefly. That brief touch sent electricity up my arm. I pulled back too quickly, and Jackson noticed. His brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything. He just went back to work. But the moment lingered between us, heavy and unspoken. That night I lay awake in bed, heart pounding, finally admitting to myself what I'd been trying to deny for weeks. I was falling for Jackson Reed, falling hard, falling fast, falling in a way that felt both inevitable and impossibly dangerous. And I had no idea what to do about it. The shift in dynamics was subtle but undeniable. I became hyper-aware of every interaction, every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment when we stood just a little too close. I started finding excuses to be near him, then hating myself for it. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, his expression unreadable, and my heart would race so fast I thought it might explode. One evening, we were washing dishes side by side. I washed, he dried. Our arms kept brushing together in the small space, and the air felt charged with something I didn't dare name. Jackson reached for a plate at the same moment I handed it to him, and our fingers overlapped completely. We both froze. Time seemed to stop. His hand was warm and calloused and strong, and he didn't pull away. Neither did I. We just stood there, hands touching over a wet plate, breathing in sync, while something enormous and terrifying passed between us. Then Jackson cleared his throat and stepped back. "Thanks," he said, his voice rough, "for the help." "Anytime," I whispered. But we both knew we weren't talking about dishes. I started pulling away after that, not because I wanted to, but because I had to, because I was living in his house, eating his food, depending on his kindness, and developing feelings for him felt like the worst kind of betrayal. He'd saved me, he'd given me a home, and I was repaying him by falling in love with him. It felt wrong, selfish, dangerous. So I created distance. I started eating meals in my room. I took longer routes when working around the farm. I stopped joining him on the porch in the evenings. I built walls between us, brick by careful brick, because I was terrified of what would happen if those walls came down. Jackson noticed. Of course he noticed. He was too perceptive not to. "Eli," he said one morning, catching me before I could escape to the garden, "did I do something wrong?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. "Everything's fine." "You're avoiding me." "I'm not." "You are." His voice was gentle but firm. "Talk to me, please." I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, he'd see everything, every feeling I'd been trying to hide, every truth I was too scared to speak. "I'm just giving you space. You've done so much for me, and I don't want to be." "Be what?" "A burden." The word hung between us like a guillotine blade. Jackson's expression changed, hurt flashing across his features before he locked it down. "Is that what you think you are?" "I don't know what I am anymore," I said honestly, and then I fled before he could see me cry. The distance grew. Days passed where we barely spoke beyond necessary farm business. The easy companionship we'd built crumbled under the weight of everything I couldn't say, and I watched it happen with a mixture of grief and relief. Maybe this was better. Maybe distance would kill these feelings before they could destroy the only home I had left. But Jackson didn't let it go. One night, about a week into our Cold War, he knocked on my bedroom door. I opened it to find him standing there in pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking exhausted and determined. "We need to talk," he said. "It's late." "I don't care. Eli, something's wrong, and I can't fix it if you won't tell me what it is." "There's nothing to fix." "Bullshit," he never cursed. The word landed like a slap. "You've been pulling away for weeks, and I don't understand why. Did someone say something to you in town? Did I do something? Because if I did, I need you to tell me so I can make it right." "You didn't do anything," I said, my voice breaking. "You've been perfect. That's the problem." He stared at me, confusion written across his features. "I don't understand." And suddenly, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Couldn't keep pretending. Couldn't keep lying to the one person who'd shown me nothing but kindness. "My parents threw me out because I'm gay," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. That's why they left me at that church. That's why they told me I'd made my choice. Because I told them the truth about who I am, and they decided I wasn't worth loving anymore. Jackson's face went very still. And you saved me, I continued, tears streaming down my face now. You gave me a home and kindness and safety. And I ruined it I choked on the words, by developing feelings I have no right to have. So I'm pulling away because it's the only decent thing I can do. I'm trying to protect you from the mess I am. Silence crashed down between us like a wave. Jackson just stood there, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read, and in that moment, I knew I'd destroyed everything. I'd taken his charity and twisted it into something uncomfortable. I'd made him regret picking me up on those church steps. I'll leave in the morning, I whispered. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I started to close the door, but Jackson's hand shot out, stopping it. Don't, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Don't you dare apologize for being honest. I couldn't look at him. I shouldn't have said anything. Eli, look at me. I couldn't. If I looked at him, I'd break completely. Please. Something in his voice made me lift my eyes, and what I saw in his face stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even surprise. It was something else entirely. Something that looked like relief and fear and hope all tangled together. You think you're the only one, he said quietly. You think you're the only one who's been lying. My heart stopped. What? Jackson ran a hand through his hair, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Why do you think I stopped on that church step? Why do you think I brought you home without hesitation? Because you're a good person. Because I recognized what I saw in your eyes, he interrupted. Because 10 years ago, that was me, thrown out, rejected, told I was wrong and broken and shameful. Because someone pulled over for me, and I swore if I ever saw someone else in that position, I'd do the same thing. The world tilted sideways. You're gay, yeah, he laughed, but it sounded painful. I've known since I was 15, came out at 17. My family didn't take it well. I joined the Marines to get away, to prove I was still a man, whatever the hell that means. Came back when my grandfather got sick, inherited this farm, and spent the last 5 years building a life where I could just be. I couldn't process what I was hearing, couldn't make it make sense. And then you showed up, Jackson continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Scared and brave and beautiful, and I thought, just give him a safe place, help him heal, don't complicate things. But then you stayed, and you smiled, and you made sandwiches and learned to cook chili and stood next to me in the kitchen with soap bubbles on your nose, and I realized I was in serious trouble. Jackson, I've been trying so hard not to cross a line, he said. You were vulnerable, you needed help. Getting involved would have been taking advantage, and I couldn't do that to you, so I kept my distance. Tried to be just a friend, just a landlord, just someone safe. But then you started pulling away, and it was killing me, and I couldn't figure out why until now. We stood there in my doorway, the space between us charged with 5 years of his loneliness and 3 months of mine. Everything I'd thought I understood had been turned upside down. You have feelings for me, I asked, my voice barely audible. Eli, he said my name like a prayer. I've had feelings for you since week 2. I've just been terrified to admit it. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was both of us, drawn together by gravity and longing and the sudden realization that we'd been dancing around the same truth for months. All I know is that 1 second we were standing in the doorway, and the next, his hands were cradling my face and my fingers were fisted in his shirt, and we were kissing like we were both drowning and the other person was air. It was desperate and gentle and fierce all at once. It was 3 months of tension and 10 years of his loneliness and 18 years of me feeling wrong in my own skin, all of it pouring out in the way his lips moved against mine, the way I pressed closer like I could merge our bodies through sheer force of will. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, neither willing to let go. I've wanted to do that for so long, Jackson whispered. Why didn't you? Because I needed you to heal first, needed you to be sure, needed it to be your choice, not something you felt obligated to give me. I pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. Jackson Reed, you are the least obligatory person I've ever met. I want this. I want you. I've wanted you since that day in the kitchen when you taught me to make chili and looked at me like I mattered. His thumb traced my cheekbone, his touch reverent. You do matter, you matter so much. We kissed again, slower this time, learning the taste and feel of each other. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I'd found where I was supposed to be. We talked until dawn, curled up together on my bed, fully clothed but wrapped around each other like we were afraid the other might disappear. We shared stories we'd never told anyone, his about the years of hiding, the military's don't ask, don't tell policy, the loneliness of coming home to a farm where he was free but still isolated. Mine about growing up different, the slow realization of what that difference meant, the terror of finally speaking the truth out, loud only to be rejected by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Your parents were wrong, Jackson said fiercely, his arms tightening around me. So goddamn wrong. There is nothing broken about you, Eli, nothing shameful, nothing wrong. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. I buried my face in his chest and cried, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of being seen and accepted and wanted. Jackson held me through it, his hand moving in soothing circles on my back, whispering reassurances until I finally fell asleep in his arms. When I woke up, golden morning light was streaming through the window, and Jackson was still there, still holding me, looking at me like I was something precious. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I replied, suddenly shy. "Still okay with all this?" I thought about it seriously, thought about the power dynamics and the vulnerability and the fact that he'd saved me and now we were, what, together, dating, in love. But all I felt was right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "Yeah," I said, "more than okay." His smile was worth every moment of fear and doubt that had led us here. We took things slowly after that. Jackson was careful, always checking in, always making sure I was comfortable, always giving me space to process. But the shift in our relationship was undeniable. We still worked the farm together, still cooked meals and washed dishes side by side. But now there were stolen kisses in the barn, hands held during evening walks. Quiet moments on the porch where I'd lean against him and feel the steady beat of his heart. We didn't rush into anything physical beyond kissing and touching and learning the landscape of each other's bodies through clothes. Jackson seemed content with that, and so was I. After years of feeling wrong in my own skin, I needed time to feel safe in my own desire. And he gave me that without question. One evening, about a month after our confession, we were lying in the grass behind the house, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. My head was on his chest, his arm around my shoulders, and I felt more at peace than I'd ever thought possible. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For stopping, for taking me in, for being patient, for being you." Jackson pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "You don't have to thank me for any of that, Eli. You being here, that's the gift. You make this place feel like a home instead of just a farm." I lifted my head to look at him. "I love you," I said, the words coming out before I could second-guess them. His eyes widened, then softened. "Yeah. Yeah, I'm in love with you, Jackson Reed. Completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully in love with you." The smile that spread across his face was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "Good," he said, "because I'm in love with you too, have been for a while now." We kissed under the emerging stars, and it felt like a promise, like a future, like everything I'd been told I could never have. Fall arrived with cooler temperatures and changing leaves. Jackson and I harvested the last of the crops together, working in comfortable tandem. The farm had never looked better. I'd spent the summer fixing what was broken, painting what was faded, planting flowers around the house that brought color and life to the property. One afternoon, Jackson's friend Marcus stopped by, a rancher from the next county over who supplied us with hay. Marcus was in his 50s, weathered and kind, with a wife and 3 grown kids. He took one look at Jackson and me working side by side. At the easy way, we moved around each other, and a knowing smile crossed his face. "Looks good here, Jackson," he said, loading bales into his truck. "Real good." Jackson glanced at me, then back at Marcus. "Yeah, it does." "That's your partner." There was a weight to the question, a significance beyond the word's surface meaning. Jackson's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine in full view of Marcus and anyone else who might see. "Yeah," Jackson said, his voice steady and proud. "That's Eli, my partner, in every sense of the word." Marcus nodded, his smile genuine. "Good for you both. About time you had someone, Jackson. Place like this shouldn't be run alone." It was such a small moment, but it felt monumental, because Jackson had just claimed me publicly, had called me his partner, had held my hand where anyone could see. And I realized that for all the fear I'd carried about being seen, being known, being out, standing there next to Jackson felt like the safest place in the world. We started making plans after that. Real plans, long-term plans. We talked about expanding the farm, maybe adding more livestock. We discussed modernizing some of the equipment, building a greenhouse for winter vegetables. Jackson mentioned wanting to start a small farm-to-table business, selling produce at local markets. "We could do it together," he said one night over dinner. "Build something that's ours, a legacy." "I like that," I said, "but Jackson." "Yes. What if my parents try to come back? What if they show up here?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll tell them they're not welcome. This is your home now, Eli, legally, morally, in every way that matters. They gave up their right to have a say in your life the moment they abandoned you at that church. And if they try to make trouble, then we'll handle it together." He reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not alone anymore. You're never going to be alone again." Tears pricked my eyes. How did I get this lucky? "Lucky?" Jackson laughed softly. "Eli, I'm the lucky one. You came into my life and turned it into something worth living. You made this farm into a home. You made me remember what it feels like to hope." Winter came, bringing cold and snow and nights that stretched on forever, but the house stayed warm. Jackson and I moved into the master bedroom together, a decision we made slowly and carefully, but once made, felt absolutely right. We'd lie tangled together under thick quilts, talking until we fell asleep, and I'd wake up to find him watching me with an expression of wonder and contentment. We celebrated Christmas quietly, just the two of us. I'd never been much for the holiday. My family's celebrations had always felt performative, strained. But with Jackson, it was different. We decorated a tree we cut down ourselves, baked cookies that turned out lopsided but delicious, and exchanged small, meaningful gifts. I gave him a leather-bound journal I'd found at a vintage shop in town, for him to record his grandfather's recipes and farm wisdom. He gave me a silver necklace with a small compass pendant. "So you always know where home is," he said, fastening it around my neck. I kissed him then, deep and grateful and full of love that felt too big for my body to contain. That night we made love for the first time. It was gentle and tentative and absolutely perfect, a slow exploration of trust and desire, of giving and receiving, of two people who'd been broken learning how to be whole together. And when it was over, when we lay wrapped in each other's arms, I finally understood what it meant to feel complete. Spring arrived, and with it came change. Jackson and I were sitting on the porch one evening when a car pulled up the long driveway, an unfamiliar sedan that immediately put me on edge. I tensed, and Jackson's arm came around my shoulders, steady and protective. The car stopped, and a middle-aged woman got out. She wore a professional suit and carried a briefcase, and her smile was warm but businesslike. "Jackson Reed," she called out. "That's me," Jackson replied, his voice cautious. "My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Alina Reed." Jackson stiffened beside me. "My grandmother." "Yes, I apologize for showing up unannounced, but there's been a matter regarding her will that required immediate attention." She pulled out some papers. "Your grandmother made some amendments shortly before she passed away. Amendments that, due to certain conditions, only became active this year. Jackson stood, his hand never leaving mine. What kind of amendments? Patricia smiled. The kind that leave you a substantial trust fund, one she'd been building for decades, with the explicit stipulation that it only be released when you built yourself a home and a family worth protecting. Her words, not mine. Jackson's hand tightened around mine. I don't understand. Your grandmother always knew who you were, Mr. Reed, and she wanted to make sure you had the resources to build the life you deserved, with someone you loved, without having to struggle. Patricia handed him the papers. It's a significant amount, enough to modernize this entire farm, expand your operations, and still have plenty left over for the future. I watched Jackson's face as he processed this, the shock, the grief, the love for a grandmother who'd understood him better than he'd ever known. Tears tracked down his cheeks, and I pulled him close, letting him cry against my shoulder while Patricia politely pretended not to notice. She knew, he whispered. All along she knew. She loved you, I whispered back, and she wanted you to be happy. The money changed everything and nothing. We modernized the farm, new equipment, repaired buildings, a state-of-the-art greenhouse. We hired help for the first time, allowing us to expand operations without killing ourselves with work. We started the farm-to-table business, selling at local markets and building a reputation for quality and integrity. But the core of our lives stayed the same. We still woke up before dawn, still worked side by side, still spent evenings on the porch watching the sun set over our land. We just did it with more security, more stability, and more hope for the future. One Saturday at the farmer's market, an elderly couple stopped at our stand. The woman picked up a tomato, examining it with the critical eye of someone who knew good produce. Her husband stood beside her, his arm around her waist in a gesture so familiar it spoke of decades together. These are beautiful, the woman said. You grow them yourselves. Yes, ma'am, I replied. Organically, on our farm about 20 miles from here. And you run it together. She glanced between Jackson and me, her eyes sharp but kind. Jackson's arm came around my shoulders. Yes, ma'am, we are partners. The word carried weight again, meaning beyond business, beyond friendship. The woman's face softened into a knowing smile. That's wonderful, she said warmly. Nothing better than building something with the person you love. We've been doing it for 43 years now. She squeezed her husband's hand. Best decision we ever made. The husband nodded, his eyes twinkling. Young folks like you starting out together, you've got the whole world ahead of you. Treat each other well, communicate honestly, and you'll go far. They bought half our stock and left with warm wishes. After they'd gone, I leaned against Jackson, overwhelmed with emotion. That could be us, I said quietly. 43 years from now, still together, still building. Jackson pressed a kiss to my temple. That will be us, he corrected. I'm not letting you go, Eli Carter, not ever. A year after that night on the church steps, Jackson proposed. We were in the back pasture at sunset, checking on a mare who was about to foal. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. The air was warm and sweet, with the smell of grass and possibility. Jackson had been quieter than usual all day, nervous energy radiating off him. Eli, he said suddenly, come here. I walked over to where he stood near the fence line. He took both my hands in his palms sweaty despite the mild temperature. A year ago, he began, his voice shaking slightly, I found you on a church doorstep in the rain. You were the most terrified, brave, beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I thought I was just helping someone who needed it. I had no idea that you were about to change my entire life. My throat tightened. You made this farm into a home. You made my days into something worth waking up for. You made me believe in love in a way I never thought I could. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my breath caught. I know we haven't been together that long. I know there's a lot of people who'd say we're rushing. But Eli, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He opened the box, revealing 2 simple silver bands. Will you marry me? Will you spend your life building this crazy, beautiful thing with me? Will you let me love you for the next 43 years and beyond? I couldn't speak, could barely breathe, could only nod frantically while tears streamed down my face. Yes, I finally managed. Yes, God, yes. Jackson slipped one ring onto my finger, and I slipped the other onto his. Then we kissed, as the sun set behind us, two broken people who'd found each other and become whole, standing on land that was ours, building a future that was limitless. We got married that fall in a small ceremony in our backyard. Marcus was there with his family. Patricia Morrison came, along with a few other friends we'd made in the community. No traditional families on either side, but the family we'd chosen was more than enough. I wore a simple suit. Jackson wore the same. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising honesty and partnership and love through whatever came next. And when the officiant pronounced us married, when Jackson kissed me in front of everyone, when our chosen family cheered, I felt like the scared 18-year-old kid on those church steps had finally, truly been left behind. That night, lying in bed with my husband, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, about being thrown away like trash and being picked up like treasure, about Jackson stopping his truck that rainy evening and saying those words that changed everything, "You're safe now." "What are you thinking about?" Jackson murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. "How different my life could have been," I said honestly, "if you hadn't stopped that day, if you hadn't taken a chance on a stranger." "I didn't take a chance on a stranger," Jackson corrected. "I saw someone who needed help, and then I got to know Eli Carter, the person who makes terrible sandwiches." "Hey, who makes excellent terrible sandwiches," he amended with a laugh, "who transforms farms, who loves with his whole heart, who made me believe in second chances. I didn't take a chance, Eli, I got lucky." I kissed him, slow and deep and filled with promise. We both did. 2 years later. The farm was thriving. Our farm-to-table business had expanded to include a small cafe in town, featuring produce and meats from our land. We'd added goats and chickens, and a donkey named Frank, who thought he was a dog. We'd built a small cottage on the property that we rented to a young couple who'd come to help with operations, two women who'd found each other and needed a safe place to start their lives together, just like we had. I was 21 now, no longer the scared kid on the church steps. I'd gotten my GED, taken some online courses in sustainable farming, and become Jackson's true partner in every sense of the word. We made decisions together, built together, lived together in a way that felt both revolutionary and completely natural. My parents never came back. I'd heard through distant relatives that they'd told everyone I'd run away, that they were praying for my return to righteousness. The narrative bothered me less than I expected. They'd written me out of their story, but I'd written myself into a better one. One morning, Jackson and I were having coffee on the porch when a beat-up car pulled into our driveway. A teenage boy got out, maybe 16 or 17, thin and scared, with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He stood there for a moment, clearly trying to decide if he should approach. Jackson set down his coffee and stood. I joined him, both of us recognizing something in that boy's posture, in the way he held himself like he was preparing to be rejected. The boy took a hesitant step forward. "Are you Jackson Reed?" "I am," Jackson said gently. I heard you help people like me." His voice cracked. "My parents found out I'm gay. They kicked me out. Someone at school said that you and your husband might." He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. Jackson was already walking toward him, and I was right behind. "What's your name?" Jackson asked. "Tyler." Jackson stopped a few feet away, his expression kind but serious. "Tyler, you're safe now. Do you have anywhere to go?" Tyler shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Then you'll stay here," Jackson said firmly. "We have a guest room, clean sheets, food, safety, for as long as you need." I watched Tyler's face crumple with relief, watched him break down the way I had 2 years ago, and I remembered that feeling. That moment when someone reached out and caught you just before you hit the ground. Jackson looked back at me, and in his eyes, I saw the same thought I was having. This is how it continues. This is how we turn our pain into purpose. This is how we make sure nobody else feels as alone as we once did. Welcome home, Tyler, I said, walking forward to stand beside my husband. You're going to be okay, we promise. And as we led him into the house, as we showed him to the guest room where I'd once slept and healed, I realized that our story wasn't just about finding each other. It was about being found, and then turning around to help others find their way too. This was our legacy, our family, our purpose. This was home. 5 years later, epilogue. The farmhouse had expanded. We'd added 2 more bedrooms, a larger kitchen, and a sunroom where people could gather and feel safe. Over the years, 12 young people had come through our doors, some staying for weeks, others for months, a few becoming permanent parts of our extended family. Tyler still lived with us. He was 21 now, working as our farm manager while attending online college classes. He'd found his confidence, his strength, his purpose. He'd also found love, a sweet guy named Marcus Jr., named after our friend Marcus, who'd become a surrogate father to him, who worked at the cafe in town. Jackson and I had just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. We were sitting on the porch, that same porch where so much had happened, watching the sun set over land that was fuller, richer, more alive than it had ever been. You know what I was thinking about today, Jackson said, his arm around my shoulders. What's that? That church step, that moment when I decided to stop. He turned to look at me, his eyes soft with emotion. I think about all the lives that one decision changed, not just yours, not just mine, but Tyler's and Sarah's and all the others who came after, all because I chose to stop that day. I thought about it, about the ripples of kindness, about how one act of compassion could cascade into dozens more, about how being saved gave you the power to save others. You changed my life, I said quietly. You gave me everything. No, Jackson kissed my temple. You gave me everything. You made me remember what it was like to hope, to love, to believe that broken things, broken people could be fixed if someone just cared enough to try. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Somewhere in the house, I could hear Tyler and Marcus Jr. laughing. From the barn came the sounds of animals settling in for the night. The farm breathed around us, alive and thriving and full of second chances. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For stopping, for seeing me, for loving me, for building this with me. Jackson pulled me closer, his heart beating steady against my side. Thank you for being brave enough to get in my truck that day, for staying, for loving me back, for helping me build something that matters. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, I thought about that scared 18-year-old kid on the church steps, about how he'd thought his life was over, that he'd been thrown away like trash, that nobody would ever want him. If I could go back and tell him anything, it would be this: hold on, someone is coming, someone who will see your worth, who will give you a home, who will love you exactly as you are, someone who will look at you and say, you're safe now. And those words, those simple, powerful words, will change everything. Because sometimes, being saved is just the beginning of the story. The real magic is what comes after, when you realize that being loved gives you the power to love others, that being helped gives you the strength to help, that being safe allows you to create safety for those who come after you. This was our story, our journey, our home. And it started with a truck stopping on a rainy evening, and a man saying 4 words that would echo through decades. You're safe now. The end. Belle, did this story touch your heart? If Eli and Jackson's journey moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more powerful LGBTQ plus love stories that celebrate resilience, hope, and finding home in unexpected places. Speech balloon comment below. Have you ever had someone show you unexpected kindness that changed your life? Or what part of Eli and Jackson's story resonated most with you? And here's the real question. Should I tell you what happened when Eli's parents showed up at the farm 5 years later? Drop a yes in the comments if you want part 2, backhand index pointing down.